your first piercing. Maybe it's not your first piercing, but your first piercing other than your lobes. I'm going to give you the ultimate guide, what you should know, kind of a basic rundown of things that you should consider before getting it done and what you should know and what that experience may be like. We're going to go through everything. Coming up next on New to Piercing, episode number 10. For those who are new to the channel, welcome to the Body Piercing and Tattooing channel. Hoping you're enjoying the videos, hope you find them useful and helpful. But for those who are new, you might not know who I am. My name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing studio located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside Skin Kitchen Tattoo. Now, this is the ultimate guide. This is probably going to be a fairly long video. I'm not going to go too in-depth, and there are, on this channel, a number of videos that go into this more in-depth. If you pick a piercing and you kind of don't know and you want to know the ins and outs of it, there's consultation videos for each individual piercing that I'm probably going to talk about today, and also pros and cons and various other videos about it. So it's one of those things where this is kind of the get your ball going. This is the basic stuff, the minimal stuff, and it is an ultimate guide, but at the same time, if you want something more in depth, move on to the next. So this is the get the reference and then expand. Number one, first thing, choosing your piercing. How do you do that? Things that you want to consider when you are choosing what that first piercing is going to be is things like what kind of statement do you want to make? What do you want to draw attention to? Maybe you really like your nose, so you want to get a nose piercing because it's going to draw attention to it. Maybe you want something a little bit more subtle. You need to think about this. What is your style like? Are you bold and brash? Are you out there? Or are you more subdued and more elegant? That makes a difference in which piercings you're going to choose. Then it comes down to employment, school, sports activities, any activities that involve a dress code. Is this going to impair your ability to do those things, or is it something that you need to research more and talk to your the person in charge and see if it's okay to have a visible piercing? You need to do that. That can lead a lot into. The other thing is, can you hide it if you need to? The last thing is plain old-fashioned scarring. Any piercing, regardless of where you get it done on your body, will leave some scarring behind. Some are more noticeable than others. So you do need to consider that before you get it done, because a lot of people have this misconception of looking at piercings as kind of a temporary thing. They can be, but for most people, they aren't, and the scarring is not temporary. We are permanently altering your body, regardless. The next thing you want to consider is what are your best options? What are the easiest to heal? What is going to not stand out as much? What is socially acceptable? And, what isn't prone to problems? Some of those would be things like earlobes, helix piercings, this upper ear area here. Trachea piercings is a good option too. Conchas can be a good option. On the face, septum piercings, nostrils, very acceptable right now. And the nice thing about the septum is you can actually hide it. Tongue piercings. Now, tongue piercings have a big adaptation period and a lot of swelling and a lot of things that you have to deal with. But the reality is it's a quick heal and it's easy to a degree to hide. Not everybody needs to know you have it. Nipple piercings. Once again, a long healing period. It does take a bit of a commitment, but it's a piercing that you can easily cover up and people don't need to know that you have it. Navel piercing, same thing. Between nipple and navel, navels tend to be a little bit more traumatic because it's on that bend of the body, but they do heal and they have a long history of healing. It just takes a bit of a commitment. And then that brings us to genital piercings. Instead of going through each individual one, what I'll say is this. Genital piercings are fast healers. They are kind of an intense experience initially, and there are some caveats and things that you have to change in your lifestyle. However, they are very easy to hide. They are one of those piercings, just like nipple piercings, that's kind of considered a private area of the body, so it's not something you're going to show to the general public and everybody around you. So they don't need to know that you have it if you want your own personal little secret. The biggest thing with choosing a piercing is that you are customizing your body. You are enhancing it. You are making it more beautiful for you and make a statement about who you are. Those are the best things to think about. You might see something and go, wow, that's really cool. But when you think about it, the reason why you think it's really cool is because it's part of your style and part of what you want to, how you perceive yourself. Also, this can be about reclaiming areas of the body that maybe you don't feel comfortable with, or beautifying things and improving them. So take your time, pick the right piercing for you, and that's the first step. Step number 2 is choosing a piercer. Now, this could be a very complicated and hard thing to do. The first thing I want to tell you is that price should not really lead to your decision. With piercing, like a lot of things in life, you get what you pay for. People that are more experienced, that have more education, more skill, are going to be more expensive. Jewelry that is of a better quality, or is more of a high-end piece of jewelry, is going to be more expensive. So those things do take into account. However, understand that just because the price is high doesn't mean it's going to be the best experience. Now, what should you look for with a piercer? First off, are they educated? Are they professional? Are they willing to answer questions? Do they seem passionate about what they do? Are they willing to take the time to explain things to you? Is their appearance somewhat clean? Do they seem like somebody that is trustworthy and is going to be there if something happens? Because support is a big part of the piercing experience. Having somebody you can reach out to and go, hey, this is going on. Is this normal? Is this not normal? And them to, being willing to answer those questions or go, hey, come on in. I want to take a look and make sure. The last one is passion and education. I already brought up passion, but passion is one of those things. Is a piercer experienced? Are they educated? Did they go through an apprenticeship? Or is this something that they just learned who knows how and just started doing? Are they continuing with their research? Are their piercing methods up to date? These are a lot of things that they have to have the passion for piercing to continue doing. Otherwise, it kind of turns into a job. But are they one of those people that's more than willing to share as much information as they can? They're almost like an evangelist of piercers or piercing, and willing to talk about everything and answer any questions and probably tell you more than maybe you ever wanted to know about piercing. You might check out this channel. That has a lot to do with that passion. Now, the third thing is choosing jewelry. With jewelry, there's there's 4 different things you want to look at. First off is style. Does it fit your style? There are a lot of different options out there, from very basic to very, very elaborate, very complicated, very beautiful hand-sculpted gold pieces and crazy stones. So it really comes down to what is your general style as a person? What type of jewelry do you wear? What type of clothing you wear, etc. I will say, though, oftentimes simplistic jewelry is best for initial piercings, mainly because it doesn't have as much value. Usually they're not as large. Just having a basic ball on there or something, opposed to having a really large gem setting, maybe less complicated to heal. Because it's not going to be caught on things as readily. It's not going to be as heavy, etc. So sometimes simplistic is best. Minimalistic is best. Size. Now, size is something that your piercer should determine. Size can be broken into 2 categories. There's the thickness of the jewelry and the width of the jewelry. The thickness of the jewelry is what we refer to as gauge, starting at the larger. And the thing that people find confusing with gauge is the larger the number, the thinner the jewelry is. The smaller the number, the thicker the jewelry is. I always tell people, if you can't remember or it seems confusing, is look at it this way. They took a piece of metal and then they didn't run a roller over it and it was this thick. Then they ran it over there once and then it was this thick, and twice, and so forth, continuously. So basically it's that compression of the metal. That's not really the method they use, but that's kind of where that comes from. Is, like a 20 gauge piece of wire, that means it's been ran over 20 times. So it's going to be thinner, more pancaked. The reason why gauge is important is we need to have it at a gauge that is going to be resistant to rejection, where your body pushes it all out. Also resistant to tearing or ripping, that cheese cutter effect. If you've known anybody that wears big looped heavy jewelry in their ears and it starts sliding, that's why it's happening, because the wire is so thin and that piercing is so thin that it can't hold that weight. The flesh starts giving. The other thing is the width. The width is always the inside diameter. So if it's a barbell or post, it's from the inside of one end to another other side. With circular jewelry, it's inside to inside of that circle, and with curved jewelry, it's from end to end on the bottom side. So if you picture like a banana, it's going to be the bottom side. Next thing is material and biocompatibility. This is very important, especially if you have any type of metal allergies, maybe you're not even aware of. The most common use of material or used material today is titanium. There's only about 0.6% of the worldwide population, they estimate, that would have a problem with a biocompatible titanium alloy. Other metals that are used in piercing are going to be things like implant-grade surgical stainless steel, which you want to stay away from if you are allergic to nickel, because it does contain a small amount of nickel, and if it doesn't have a high-quality finish, that nickel could come in contact with your skin and cause problems, that allergic reaction. The other ones are niobium, glass. When you get into stretching piercings, you might find some bones, but usually with a piercing, that's like the main three. I'm not a fan of man-made materials such as bioplastic, which is nobody knows what it's made out of, or acrylics, and I really don't suggest piercing with them initially. And then the last thing with choosing jewelry is what I've already talked about. What kind of statement do you want to make, and what fits into your style? Do you want a bold statement? You want a simple statement? You want people to go, oh, I didn't even notice you had that. That can be changed greatly by just changing the jewelry. I have had clients that have mentioned this numerous times where it's like they started out with a very small gem in their nostril, and then they switched out to a larger gem with a gold, and everybody started noticing it. People that they worked with and saw every day suddenly noticed they had their nostril pierced, because before that they didn't. So really, size, shape, color, etc., all those things can change how people perceive you, and how people notice that piercing and how that piercing looks. Step number 4, preparing for the piercing. If you can, talk to your piercer, go through a consultation, and find out exactly what they suggest for Aftercare products. The most common thing you're going to see on the market today, and most piercers are going to suggest, is a sterilized saline spray, preferably in a mist. The most common brand out there is Neomed's Piercing Aftercare. It's what we sell here at the studio, and I'm probably going to put one of those product things where you can buy it online. Tags, I think they call them now. I don't know. YouTube keeps changing things. Basically, that is what we suggest. That's something you can get in advance. Most studios will sell this, and you can pick it up at the time of your piercing. Find out ahead of time so that you're not out searching for this stuff after you get the piercing done. The other thing they may suggest is some type of antiseptic mouthwash if you get an oral piercing. Talk to them about what they suggest, what brands, what works, what doesn't work, what you should look for, and what you should get. Usually, most people are going to say an alcohol-free antiseptic mouthwash. Most common one on the market is probably Biotine. If you're getting an oral piercing, like a tongue piercing, buy the soft foods in advance. You are going to have to change your diet, especially during the swelling period. So simple foods are best. So things like baby food, applesauce, yogurt, nutritional shakes, smoothies, ice cream, all that stuff. Get all that stuff ahead of time so that you have it on hand, so you're not out there with this fresh done piercing searching through the grocery aisle trying to find everything you can eat while your stomach grumbles. Next one, get plenty of sleep the night before. And I really suggest not partying the night before. If you're one of those people that likes to go and have a few drinks or do other things, I really suggest that you abstain for at least 24 to 48 hours beforehand. The hangover, the dehydration, etc., will make the experience worse, to be honest with you. And oftentimes, even though you're not intoxicated, your blood is still at a thinner level than it would normally, so you're going to probably see more bleeding. So it's best to make sure you just relax, have a nice full night's sleep, a night in, read a book, whatever it takes. Just don't go out and trip the lights, fantastic, and all that stuff. On your way to the studio, or right before, let's say you set up an appointment for 2 o'clock, go and get lunch. Have a nice dinner, something you really enjoy, something that you find relaxing. especially if you're getting oral piercings, because you're not going to be able to eat what you like probably for a few days at least. So kind of get that out of your system and kind of get your basically your blood sugar up and you're in a more relaxed state. Now, if you have health issues or you take a prescribed medication and you're unsure of whether or not it can affect things either while the piercing's going on or afterwards or the healing process, talk to your piercer about it. If they're unsure about it, contact your physician. Get the okay from them because they have better access to all your medical records. They also have better knowledge of how those medications interact. So it's always best to be safe than sorry. Next thing I'm going to talk about is when you should delay getting pierced. This is a situation where it's going to be better off for you to wait till a later date to get that piercing. I know you have that impulse right now to get it done, or maybe you want to have it for this special event, but it may be better for you to wait until afterwards to get the piercing done. And this is going to be things like vacations. Vacations are not a good time to be healing a piercing out, especially a fresh one. You are in an environment you can't control. You have no way of knowing how clean everything is. There may be microorganisms or other pathogens in that environment that you've never been exposed to, so you've never built up an immune system to. So you really kind of need to avoid vacations during that healing process. So if you have a trip planned, I would suggest waiting until afterwards, especially if you're going somewhere where you're going to want to swim. And we'll get to that a little bit. Well, we'll get to that later. The next reason would be upcoming events. If you are going to be in your second cousin's wedding and you want to get a facial piercing, you might want to check with the bride before you get the piercing, because coming to me a day or two after a week to ask me how you can hide it is not going to be a good situation. It would usually be best to wait until you can leave that jewelry in indefinitely, meaning usually you don't want to remove the jewelry at all during the healing period, but even after that, during that seasoning period that happens afterwards, taking the jewelry out even for short periods of time can result in the piercing closing. So if you got something coming up like graduation photos, anything that somebody's going to be a little upset if you show up with, a new piercing, wait. Medical procedures. This is a common one because a lot of times we don't even know they're going to happen. That's how health is. If you know, in fact, you have surgery or an MRI or some type of testing where probably your medical professional is going to make you remove the jewelry regardless of what it's made out of, I would suggest waiting until after that procedure is over before you get pierced. You're not going to be able to take it out. Best case scenario is your piercer may be able to change it over to like glass retainers during the procedure and then switch back to the normal jewelry afterwards. But it's just one more thing that's going to help prolong healing periods and cause problems. So if you know you have one, put it off until afterwards. Next one, swimming and seasonal activities. If you swim, you are not going to be able to do that while you have an open wound on your body called a piercing. You want to wait. I don't suggest getting in the water at all until that piercing's completely healed. I know other people are going to say different things, but they're just trying to please you. Anytime you submerge that piercing during the healing process in a body of water that's big enough for your whole body to get in and move around in, it is filled with microorganisms and you are risking infection. So if you are one of those people that swims all summer long and the beach is your life for 3 months, wait until afterwards. I know you'd love to have that navel piercing to show off at the beach all summer, but the reality is you're going to be better off to wait until the fall, heal it out, and then next year you can sport it at the beach. The other thing about seasonal activities, things like motorcycles, motocross, hockey, anything that involves constrictive protective equipment. If you are one of those people that's active in those things, or even if you're like a rock climber and you want to get your nipples pierced, you might want to think about when you're doing that the least so that you can avoid contact. The problem with restricted things like helmets, especially ear piercings, possibly eyebrow piercings, and etc., or things that cover the face affecting septum piercings, oral piercings, everything basically, it's usually best to wait to where you don't have to put those things on a regular basis, because it's very difficult to isolate those piercings, keep the protective gear free of contaminants, and also just avoid abuse to the piercings. So wait till afterwards. And the last one I've already kind of mentioned a little bit about, but school activities, employment, special activities, maybe you're in a play, maybe you're in a sport activity, or, what have you. If there's a dress code involved with anything that you consider important to your life, you may want to make sure and check with the people in charge that you can have the piercing, or wait until after you're done doing that activity. There is no way you're going to be able to hide this probably indefinitely, and taking it in and out, as I mentioned earlier, will cause issues. So it's always best to wait until after you're done doing whatever it is and then get it pierced. Or when you have a break long enough to heal the piercing, and then switch out to some other type of jewelry that's easier to hide. Number 6, let's talk about the main event, the piercing itself. Everything's kind of built up to this, and it's the day of, and what's going to happen. First thing is, feel free to bring a friend along or someone for moral support. I always encourage it, because I kind of look at it, the more comfortable you are in the environment and dealing with me and etc., the better the experience is going to be for you. And that is part of it. Piercing, I often say, is supposed to be fun, because people are surprised when we're having a good time. And bringing a friend along that is supportive and, is excited about you getting the piercing done, that's a good idea. Some piercers will not allow people into the piercing room. That's something you can find out ahead of time, but at least they'll be in the lobby rooting for you. Number 2, consultation. You should request, or they should give it voluntarily, a consultation that's going to cover the basics about that piercing before you get it done. That will involve what it's going to take to heal it, average healing times, what you need to do, cross-contamination prevention, things like risks that are involved with the piercing, jewelry options. They should check your anatomy to make sure the piercing is even possible, and just give you a basic overview of what you're getting yourself into. Next thing that's going to happen is you're going to choose the jewelry. With this, your piercer should guide you through the process. First off, picking out the size, the correct gauge, the correct length that's going to work best for you, and then guiding you through the process of what particular styles or et cetera is going to work best as far as gym ins and various other things. In some cases, you may have only 2 choices. In a lot of cases, you may have as many as 200 choices. So it really comes down to a good piercer will kind of give you that kind of, here's the basic, and this is where we can expand to, and guide you through what they think is going to look best and work best. Keep in mind, they do this every day. They have an eye for this. If they're good at their job, and they know what looks good. Usually, the next thing I have people do is fill out a waiver, though you can do that in advance on with some studios, including mine. This is going to cover things like liability, of course, and consent. It's also going to cover things like whether or not you have medical conditions, you're under the influence of any medication, controlled or uncontrolled substance, have any health issue. All that stuff is going to be on there. Read it, fill it out, be truthful. Next is going to come the piercing experience itself. Generally, this kind of goes into steps. First thing that happens is the piercer washes and scrubs their hands. Then they will disinfect a tray and lay out a sterile drape, and then start adding tools to that. Then don gloves, and open the packaging, the sealed packaging and pouches to get all the tools ready to go. Then they will disinfect the area, mark it, show you the piercing mark, talk to you about it. Marking is always a collaborative effort. I always tell people, if they have like a long-term goal of groupings, or maybe they want to wear a different type of jewelry, like for example, they're getting their nostril pierced, but they want to have that option to have a ring in it in the future, talk to your piercer about that at that time. What is your long-term goals? It's important because, and don't hesitate to ask them to remark it, or ask them to move it, ask a friend to take a look at it, all that stuff. The biggest thing is, don't touch the area. Use your mouth to tell us, not your fingers, because that means we have to disinfect it again, which is not a big deal, but it's best if we don't have to do that 3-4 times. Next is what's going to happen is we're going to put you in a reclined position or a position to do the piercing, and then do the piercing. Now, this can vary. Technique and style or methods can vary greatly from piercer to piercer and from piercing to piercing. Also, with the thing, I guess I didn't I didn't clarify this. If they are doing open pouch, or not open pouch, unpouched single setup for that piercing, sometimes they're not unwrapping things. Sometimes they're just pulling that thing out of the autoclave, setting it down, and doing it. Things you want to look for, though, is they should use one pair of gloves for setup and marking, or disinfecting and marking, a second set of gloves for the actual piercing, and then after the piercing is done, they should put on a third pair for cleaning up the area and getting rid of, putting all the tools and everything in its proper place and disposed of properly, and then wash your hands again, of course, and then clean everything. These are steps to basically ensure that we don't contaminate anything. Also, if they go to the drawer to pick up new stuff after they've touched you or during the healing or during the piercing, they should always change gloves. Anytime there's a chance of there being some type of contamination, they should always go from one pair of gloves to another pair of gloves to reduce that likelihood. It's a good habit. Most piercers have it, but if they just put on one pair of gloves and hand you the waiver form and have you fill it out, and even at the end when they're doing the transaction, they still got their gloves on, no, you don't want to be there unless you like hepatitis. One of the things that amazes me is how different the quality of aftercare instructions are in the piercing industry. In my opinion, this is how it should go. First off, you should have written instructions that have your jewelry information on there, when it was done, who did it, what your minimum healing time is on average, also how to get a hold of them, and written instructions. They should also go through those instructions, the basics of them, verbally before you leave. And the reason why is so that you have that opportunity that if something doesn't make sense to you, you can ask them a question about it and get clarification. Handing somebody a QR code and sending them on their way, or a blank piece, just a thing that they got from some organization, that isn't cutting it. They really need to explain how to do things. And one of the reasons why there are so many issues with piercings of people that go home and they're like, oh, I started using Bactine on it because they didn't tell me to do anything different. The reason why these things happen is because you aren't educating your clients. So here's, as of December of 2024, which still sounds like the future to me, what we generally suggest for aftercare is cleaning twice daily using a sterile saline spray. The most common on the market, as already mentioned before, is Neomed Piercing Aftercare. The reason why most people like it is it comes out in a fine mist. There are other products on the market, different name brands, and different nozzles. If it's a nozzle that squirts out like a squirt gun, you need to use it differently than you do something that comes out in a fine mist. If it's a fine mist type, just spray the piercing area, let it stay in contact for about 5 minutes, air dry, leave it alone. If it is a kind that comes out like a squirt gun, you may want to apply that to something like a sterile piece of gauze sponge. My personal favorite are the Johnson & Johnson 2x2s. They're fairly inexpensive. I think you can get a box of 50 or 25 for like $5 or $6. You just apply it to the area, let it stay in contact for 5 minutes. Same thing, let it air dry, or if it's really driving you nuts, you can pat it dry, but don't mess with it, is what I'm getting at. Some people will suggest wiping off that now like more liquefied discharge. That's okay, but it's my experience that people tend to go, oh, the perfect thing for that is a Q-tip. And that's where problems arise. The other thing I suggest doing is the end of your shower, depending on where the piercing's at, either pull your hair back out of the way and let the water flow over it, or present that area and let the water flow over it for about 30 seconds. What we're doing with these two things is removing that hardened discharge. And the reason we want it off there, as I mentioned earlier, is when it shifts or moves, it'll agitate it, which can lead to issues. If you have a situation where it doesn't seem like it's coming off, or it seems like there's an excessive amount of it, see your piercer, have them clean it for you, and take a look at it, because there might be something else going on that needs to be addressed. Do not run to the medicine cabinet and start pulling out everything tipped with cotton with a sharp point, or some stranger suggested on the internet 5 years ago, and start digging around in there to get the discharge off. You're going to cause problems, infection possibly, or other problems. So see your piercer. Now, if you're getting an oral piercing, there may be additional things like rinsing with Biotene antiseptic mouthwash or an alcohol-free mouthwash, doing warm saltwater rinses. That varies from piercer to piercer. Personally, my latest, once in the morning, once at night on both of those is more than enough. Back in the day, we used to suggest that you rinse every time you ingest anything. If you smoke, rinse, and this led to problems and prolonged healing. It's just a little too obsessive. Cross-contamination prevention would be the next part of Aftercare Instructions. Cross-contamination prevention is basically creating habits of avoiding contact with that piercing in ways that may cause an infection or introduce a foreign microorganism or pathogen into the area, and then you have a problem. Things with cross-contamination are things like wash your hands before you handle it. No oral contact. No exchange of bodily fluids on or around the piercing. Keep your environment clean. Clothing, bedding, towels, anything that comes in contact with the piercing. Do not submerge the piercing in bodies of water you can't control the quality of, which is pretty much everything but your own clean bathtub until the piercing is healed. Keep pets away from it. Do not let them sleep in the bed with you, especially under the covers or close to wherever that piercing is. Other piercings are going to have additional steps and things that you want to avoid depending on their location, because they're going to come in contact with different objects that you may not consider a problem. Things like helmets, hats, for ears piercings, phones, earbuds, etc. Those usually a piercer will go through additional things either in the consultation or when they do their aftercare instructions. The biggest thing is, if you are in doubt of whether or not something is clean, don't put it anywhere near the piercing. The other thing that most people don't understand is they'll go, yeah, the piercing's here, but I just touch it over here and rub it, and that makes me feel like content. Bacteria, microorganisms, etc. do move on the surface of the skin. They are organic organisms. They are not stationary. They can move. So yeah, just avoid the area, period. Might sound like the same thing, but then there's isolation. Because even if something's clean, you should not be playing with the piercing, spinning it, rotating it, moving it, making bets on it. I don't know. You bet on it and then spin it. Is that why you're spinning it? Playing with the piercings. Also clothing that's constrictive around the area. Sleeping on the piercing. Anything that hurts right after you get it done, you shouldn't be doing. Because your body is telling you every time it hurts to do something that, hey, man, I'm working here. And you doing that is going to make my job a lot harder. Stop doing it. Because eventually what your body will do is, okay, fine. You don't want to stop playing with this? Fine. I'm going to build up this big, ugly red bump until you stop playing with it. That'll teach you. So always isolate the piercing. If it hurts to do something, don't do it. Simple. Another misconception that causes this type of problem with isolating the piercing is a lot of people think that once the piercing has gotten to the point where it doesn't hurt anymore, it's okay to start sleeping on it or it's healed. It isn't healed. It just means it stopped hurting when you did that. Wait until the piercing is completely healed, and even then, do it kind of cautiously, to say the least. The next one is have a piercing buddy. And a piercing buddy is somebody that can monitor, check out your piercing on a regular basis, and make sure that things are going well. This is especially important on piercings that you can't see directly. Things like ear piercings, for example. It's a good idea to have someone else that can kind of take a look at it and assess what's going on. You can also do this with like a mobile phone or device, like videotape the area or take photos of it. But it's one of those things where it's kind of half and half. It's usually a good idea to have that human eye. The other reason why it's a good idea to do it that way opposed to what most people will do, if not given the option, is start feeling around the area and see if there's something going on. When you do that, you're causing abuse. You're possibly introducing foreign pathogens there. You're doing everything wrong. So it's best to have somebody or a method that doesn't involve contact. If there's something going on, you're not quite sure what it is, go see your piercer. If you think you have an issue, go see your piercer. Don't prolong it. The longer you prolong things, the worse they get. And it might be a simple fix at the beginning, but later on, it's not going to be that simple. The next step, number 8, is follow-ups and downsizing. Now, depending on the piercing, if it was done with post jewelry, more than likely it is going to need to be downsized at some point. And when we say that, we pierce with something long to allow for swelling and inflammation, but once that is done, leaving that longer post in there just increases the amount of movement, which is going to prolong your healing period. In some cases, especially with upper ear cartilage flat piercings, the piercing will start moving and migrating angle if you do not go to a shorter post, just basically because of how it sits in the body. So usually most people say in about 6 to 8 weeks, come in and have that downsize. Talk to your piercer about that. They should bring this up when they're going through aftercare and possibly even the consultation too, and set up a time for you to come in. Me personally, I offer a discount on the jewelry, the back, and I also never charge to change them. I want that outcome to be as good as it possibly can be, and downsizing makes a difference. The other thing is follow-ups. If you are especially when you're new to piercing and you don't know exactly what to expect, don't hesitate to set up a follow-up appointment or a consultation just to come in, have the piercer spend 5 or 10 minutes looking at it, address any additional questions you may have about the piercing, just to kind of keep your mind at ease and keep things on that track to healing. Don't hesitate to call, email, what have you, but sometimes just going in, sitting down with the piercer is the best option. Now, number 9, living with a piercing. If you have threaded jewelry, like barbells, circular barbells, curved barbells, it's always best to check the tightness of those balls on a weekly basis, even after it heals. They can come unscrewed, and they usually fall out at the worst possible time in the worst environment to deal with it. This is especially true of oral piercings where you have a mouthful of food or something else. So check them on a regular basis. Nothing sucks more than losing an end and not be able to get in somewhere and getting a new piece of jewelry put in there in time for the piercing, and by the time you get around to it, the piercing's closed. Nothing sucks more than that. Just spend that extra time once a week and just make sure they're on there tight. Cleaning the piercing and jewelry. A lot of people will continue to use saline long after the piercing is healed. You can use it to clean off, basic dead skin cells and etc. It's good at that, but it's not necessary. Warm water, soap, rinsing in the shower, that sort of thing is usually enough to keep it clean. With some gym settings, especially the ones where there's kind of a little bit, the prong settings where there's space underneath to allow that light to get in and reflect outward, sometimes they'll build up dry skin cells and et cetera in there and gunk. And cleaning them or going to see your piercer, usually they'll clean it in an ultrasonic tank to kind of get some of that gunk out of there. And usually, depending on the shop, they may not even charge you for it because they want it to look as good as it possibly can. But sometimes using just a toothbrush and a little bit of warm water and some elbow grease will get that stuff out of there. It's always best to leave the jewelry in. Piercing jewelry is designed to stay in the body for an extremely long period of time, a lifetime in general. Taking it out and leaving it out for periods of time is just asking for that piercing to start closing and you having problems getting the jewelry back in or damaging the piercing itself. And kind of going through a mini healing period or grumpiness just because you decide you want to leave it out for 2 days. Now, that isn't the same as resting. Resting is usually something that you'll come across occasionally, but that's in reference to stretching piercings. When somebody has reached a goal, when they've increased the gauge of the jewelry they want in their lobe, for example, they will take the jewelry out at night to allow that to rest so that it doesn't keep getting bigger. But with regular jewelry, regular piercings, there's no reason to leave it out for any period of time. And even if you've had the piercing for a long period of time and you're going into any type of medical situation where you have to remove the jewelry or what have you, it's usually a good idea to get a retainer, glass preferably, and put in it while you have to do that just to make sure that piercing doesn't close. Because everybody's a little different. Some people heal over and close very quickly. Some piercings are more prone to that than other piercings. And you want to keep the piercing because that's why you have it. So take care of it. Keep something in it. Even after the piercing is healed, abuse can affect a healed piercing, especially in that first year or two. Things like obsessively taking the jewelry in and out and changing it. Things like sleeping on it, getting it caught on things, I don't know, wearing helmets. Sometimes those can cause healed piercings to suddenly become very grumpy and very traumatic. Do take that into consideration, and when it hurts to do something, stop doing it or try to avoid it in the future. Just because it's healed doesn't mean you can join the sideshow and put a 20-pound weight on your tongue piercing and not have it tear. And the last one, stretching. Stretching doesn't come up in all piercings, but it's always something we generally talk about, especially with ear piercings and etc. A few genital piercings. Stretching is for those who don't know, it is the method of slowly increasing the thickness of the jewelry over a period of time so that the hole gets bigger and bigger and bigger. This is a slow process. It's not something you do overnight. And usually you want to consider that if it takes 6 months for a piercing to heal, it's going to take a year for it to stretch to get to the point where you can do it safely. There's a lot of different methods to this. Personally, especially starting out, if you do plan, like you're getting a low piercing and you're planning on stretching to a large gauge, it's usually best to start with maybe a thicker piece of jewelry to begin with to kind of give you a jump start, and then wait about 6 months to a year, and then come in and have the piercer put a taper pin through the area. And what a taper pin is it's a tapered pin. I know that sounds self-explanatory, but just so you know, one side has a thin gauge on it, usually less than what you have in there. Like, for example, it's 18 gauge on one side. The other side will be 12 gauge. So it slowly increases in thickness. And when you're first starting out, you kind of don't have a feel for it. It's a good idea to just slowly insert that taper. And if it slides right through, then yes, you're ready for that next gauge. But if you are catching and it takes effort to push it through, or you're feeling a lot of pain, you're not ready yet. So it's kind of a cheap, easy way to do that instead of trying to force a brand new $80 set of plugs into a hole that you're damaging and blowing out and causing problems. So, and I think I need to do an updated video on stretching in the future, so you'll probably see that on this channel. Well, that's it. Did I cover everything? Did I miss anything? Do you have questions? Please leave them in the comments. I do answer them when I have time. Also, check out our merch store. Links are in the description. And also, hey, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If you are interested in piercing and you're new to it, there is a lot of great information on our channel. And also on my website, AxiomPiercing.com. So go down the rabbit hole is what I'm saying. Come with me down the rabbit hole of piercing. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I would love to see you for your piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you in that next video.